was the sin of Jeroboam in 1 Kings chapter 12? What was it? It's a good question. What have you been told all throughout the many years you've been doing your ministry? Have you ever heard any explanation as to what it was?
Yeah. What the Northern Kingdom did was repeated by what became future Christianity, and that Jeroboam, instead of following the Torah as the God of Israel gave it to be followed, he took some things that the God of Israel said to do, and he mixed it with the ways of the people about them. And this mixed worship is what the sin of Jeroboam is. And there's a name for this mixed worship in the scriptures, and it is called Baal worship. Now, before I understood and I saw examples that the mixed worship was called Baal worship, I had a preconception in my mind that Baal worship was another religion that was practiced in the land of Canaan that was separate and distinct from faith in Yahovah and faith in the God of Israel. But then upon closer examination, I realized that what the scriptures call mixed worship of the God of Israel, that it says that is Baal worship.
The only understanding I've ever had in my years in the paradigm of Orthodox Judaism is that he made a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month. I mean, that's what it says. But I didn't know why he necessarily did it. I mean, the scripture tells us he just didn't want anybody going to Jerusalem. But there's something else going on here.
Okay, so if we want to look at the bigger picture of understanding the sin of Jeroboam itself.
Okay.
All right. So it says in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28, when the king didn't want to go to Jerusalem, and 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 27, it says the king took counsel. In our modern day, we'd say he had a board meeting, okay? And it says, and he made 2 calves of gold and said, now look at this phrase, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. That's quoting Exodus chapter 32 in the building of the golden calf. So if we go back to Exodus and chapter 32, we can see in the narrative there, in verse 4, it says, and he, that is Aaron, received them at their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool after he had made it a molten calf and said, these be your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt.
Wow.
So what was said here in the making of the golden calf in Exodus chapter 32 verse 4 is what the narrative is trying to convey regarding the sin of Jeroboam in 1 Kings chapter 12 verse 28, that Jeroboam, because he would not go to Jerusalem, then it was said, in effect, behold your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So in other words, the sin of Jeroboam is being equated in seriousness to the sin of the golden calf. So now, if you go back and look at the sin of the golden calf, and back to Exodus chapter 32. So when I was growing up, every year I'd watch the movie The Ten Commandments. I'm sure you've watched the movie multiple times. And so there was an image in my mind that got created from watching the movie like The Ten Commandments and other things, that this golden calf was a god of Egypt somehow. But if you look at the narrative in Exodus chapter 32, in verse 5, it says, when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. That is before the golden calf. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow is a feast to Yahovah. So when they're making the golden calf and worshiping the golden calf, it says we're going to have a festival to Yahovah. they were worshiping Yahovah. They were worshiping the God of Israel when they were worshiping the calf. See, what they did is they put the God of Israel in their image. They made an image of him, and they worshiped the image of him and called it the worship of him. And so they weren't worshiping a God of Egypt. They said, tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. So here it says, and Aaron made a proclamation. And this is what the feasts are called.
Proclamations.
Yeah. It's the same word that's used in Leviticus chapter 23 about the festivals of the Lord. So this is mixed worship. Okay? So now if we look at what the northern kingdom was doing in the context of the sin of Jeroboam, let's go to 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 32. So we're looking at 2 Kings chapter 17 verse 32. It's describing the worship of the northern kingdom. It says in verse 32, so they feared Yahovah. They feared Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And so this is the God of Israel. So the northern kingdom is expressing worship to the God of Israel. They feared the Lord. But in fearing the Lord, it says they made unto them of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. So they're doing that while they're fearing the Lord. So now in the next verse, in verse 33, it repeats it. It says, they feared Yahovah. They feared Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. They feared the God of Israel. They feared the God of Israel, and they served their own gods. You see, they're serving their own gods while they're fearing the God of Israel. So the northern kingdom...
That's a mixing.
They participated in mixed worship. All right, now we're going to look at 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 34.
Okay.
It says, unto this day... they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord. See, verse 32 says they feared the Lord. Verse 33 this says they feared the Lord. Verse 34 says they did not fear the Lord. So it's like, did they fear Yahovah or did they not fear Yahovah? The answer is yes.
They feared both.
They feared Yahovah, but they didn't fear him in the form of respect, keeping the commandments.
So it's respect and honor and awe of him, and saying, listen, you're the boss and we do what you say. But they weren't doing that. They were saying, well, we'll just do both of these things. We'll kind of cover all of our bases.
Yeah, they didn't fear him in the context of expressing worship unto him the way that he said. Okay, so it says, they fear not the Lord, neither do they after their statutes or after their ordinances or after the Torah and the commandment which Yahovah commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. So now look at this. You know, in verse 32 and verse 33, when it says they feared Yahovah, when it's repeated, it's emphasizing they were in their hearts and in their worship, they were fearing Yahovah when it gets repeated. But then after it emphasizes that that's what they were doing, then it says in verse 34, they did not fear Yahovah. And now in the last verse of the chapter, in verse 41, we get the conclusion. It says, so these nations feared Yahovah and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they unto this day.
To this very day.
So the sin of Jeroboam is mixed worship. Look, this is what the northern kingdom did. Biblical history's prophecy. So this is what ultimately future Christianity did, particularly with Constantine bringing in a mixed worship system. So we need to come out of that mixed worship system. We need to follow the Torah. So now people have embraced following the Torah, but they haven't come to the realization that in following Torah, particularly in keeping the festivals, that they're then doing it in mixed worship as well. So they're keeping the festivals according to what Yahovah said, but they're doing it according to a Babylonian calendar. And so they just exchanged the mixed worship of Christianity for the mixed worship practices and customs of Judaism.
Of Judaism, yeah.
Okay, now this mixed worship, it says in 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 16, it says, they left the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim, and they made molten images, and they made 2 calves, and made a grove, and they worship all the host of heaven, and they serve Baal. So this mixed worship is called Baal worship.
Wow.
Okay,
wow.
And so you was a tour guide in Israel, so you go up to Tel Dan, up in the north.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see the archaeological ruins of this religious practice that was done there. I mean, I've been up there a couple times. I don't know how many times you've been, but it's just amazing of what's being described here.
When you read here in Exodus chapter 20, where it says in verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. The Hebrew text is not actually saying that. I've looked at it very carefully. The Hebrew text is actually saying, you will not have any other gods or Elohim on my face. Don't put the gods of the other nations or other people on my face. Literally, al panim, on my face. Don't make my face reflect those gods, because that's not who I am.
So now if we look at the outline, the characteristics of the son of Jeroboam, first of all, 3 times a year we're told in Devarim chapter 16 verse 16, all of the males are supposed to go to Jerusalem. So instead of going to Jerusalem, Jeroboam had 2 alternative places of worship. And they were Dan in the north and Bethel.
Bethel in the south, yeah.
Okay, so an alternative place of worship. And then it says in verse 31, he made houses of high places, and he made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi.
Wow, he made priests of all the other people.
A substitute priesthood. And then
Terrible.
It says in verse 32, Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day, like the feast that is in Judah. It's referring to the Feast of Tabernacles.
So why would he do that?
So in Judah, it's the 7th month, and
15th day of the 7th month?
The 15th day of the 7th month. So Jeroboam had an alternative time to keep the festivals, which particularly here for the Feast of Tabernacles, he did it 1 month later. He did it on the 8th month and the 15th day. So there's the characteristics of the sin of Jeroboam. But what we are addressing is, in particular, how does this relate to the calendar?
The Beit Sadok calendar, yeah.
Yeah. So in order to answer that question, we need to understand that here, in the days of Jeroboam, that the high priests in Jerusalem are Zadok priests, because Jeroboam is after the days of Solomon. So at the beginning of Solomon's reign, we had Zadok was the priest. So now when the kingdom gets split, what calendar is the Zadok priesthood following? They're following this priestly calendar that we see back in Exodus in chapter 16. So what Jeroboam is saying, if I go to Jerusalem to keep the festivals, that's why you're going to Jerusalem, to keep the festivals there at the temple in Jerusalem, that if I go to Jerusalem to keep the festivals, according to what calendar? Well, according to the calendar of the Zadok priests, which would be the calendar in the Qumran.
But that's the very same calendar that Rehoboam was keeping in Judah.
He was keeping that in Judah.
He was acknowledging the Zadokite priesthood authority.
He was.
Yeah. So therefore, Jeroboam is saying, if I allow everybody here under my authority in the northern kingdom,
Right.
and if I allow them and give them permission to go up to Jerusalem, they're going to follow the Zadokite priesthood authority, and I'm going to lose my authority over their lives.
That's exactly right. And in losing their authority over their lives, he said, in effect, it's going to create division.
Ah, that's an interesting.
It's going to create division. So he wanted to have the authority over his people, wanted to have his people united under him. And so in the name of unity, he would not keep the Zadok priestly calendar.
This is interesting because we hear a lot in the movement. I mean, over many years, I've heard this thing that leaders will say, we don't want to do that. We don't want to acknowledge that or this particular idea or this particular concept because we don't want to cause division.
Exactly.
We don't want division. We want unity. And in the calendar, that's one very good reason why they say we don't want to do the calendar.
When they say we don't want to do the Zadok priestly calendar because it will create division, they are repeating the words of the sin of Jeroboam.
They're saying Jeroboam's words.
Yeah. So not literally, but functionally. Okay. So what happens is they analyze the situation. The leaders will analyze the situation, the movement, and then they'll go seek counsel or advice from others, or maybe have a board meeting, and they'll say, this isn't a good idea to do the Zadok priestly calendar because it'll create division, and look at the consequence for the ministry, look at the consequence for the congregation. So therefore, we don't want to go there. Okay, so they're reasoning in their heart by taking counsel. So in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 26, it says, Jeroboam said in his heart, now will the kingdom return to the house of David. He's making a rationalization, a determination, a calculation. He didn't know if that was going to happen or not. So he says, now if the people go to do the sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, that's the temple, and you're going to do the sacrifice while you're keeping the festivals, then he says, then the heart of the people will turn unto their Lord, even under Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me, and they will show allegiance to Rehoboam. In other words, Jeroboam was afraid that if the people kept the Zadok priestly calendar, or we might say, if they learned about it, they might want to do it. And so we don't want to explain it to them. We don't want to teach it to them.
We want to keep it away from people.
We want to keep it away. We're not going to go to Jerusalem. We're not going to talk about the calendar. And so if we don't talk about the calendar, then the people won't learn about it. If they don't learn about it, they won't want to do it. So we have to keep them from going there. We have to keep them from learning about it, from being taught about it.
But this is happening in the Messianic movement today as it has been for quite some time.
Yeah. Here's what the prophets of Israel were told to do. This is 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 13. Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets, by all the seers, saying, turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes according to the Torah which I commanded your fathers, which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. So what we're trying to do, and the spirit of the prophets, is we're trying to present what do the scriptures actually say. Do the scriptures say to follow a Babylonian calendar, or do the scriptures say that we're supposed to follow this priestly calendar, going back to the Torah, that the God of Israel gave authority to the sons of Aaron, the high priesthood, and that the high priesthood is only supposed to be of Aaron and his sons, which we've previously explained in other segments, that ultimately that came down to Eleazar, Phinehas, and then Zadok the priest. And so to follow the Torah high priesthood, we have to acknowledge the authority that Yah gave to the Zadok priest, that's explained specifically in Ezekiel 44 verse 15 and verse 24. And so that's teaching Torah, and then explaining that this was lost. So that which was in the days of David and Solomon, that Zadok was the priest and that we followed this calendar, ultimately in time, that got lost. So the tabernacle of David fell. So remember when we reviewed Acts chapter 15 in an earlier segment?
Yes.
Well, as a part of the ruling that James gave regarding Deuteronomy chapter 17,
he was referencing about the tabernacle of David falling based on Amos chapter 9 verse 11.
Exactly. So he says in Acts chapter 15 verse 16, after this I will return and build again the tabernacle of David which is fallen. So we are today in the days of the fallen tabernacle of David. And our calling and part of the ministry of the Spirit of Elijah to restore is to restore the tabernacle of David. In order to restore the tabernacle of David, we have to go back to the days of David, when David ruled over all 12 tribes, and ultimately at his death in the beginning of the reign of Solomon, Zadok is the priest, and we have Zadok priestly authority following the festivals according to that calendar. This needs to be restored in our days. That's what we're called to do.
So this is what Jeroboam is afraid of. He's saying, I guess in a summary statement, look, if all of these people under my authority in my kingdom, on the northern kingdom, right?
Yeah.
If I allow them to go back to Rehoboam, who is trying to establish the tent or tabernacle of David, right?
Yes, he's trying to be faithful to David.
Yeah, and he's trying to do that, and Jeroboam says, no, we're not going there. We're not going under Rehoboam, because that means going under the Zadokite priesthood. That means following the calendar, following their halakha, their rules, their authority. If we do that, he's saying, I'm done for. I mean, I'm cooked. I'm done. And he's not going to let that happen.
No.
And that is crucial to the story here.
And so that which was going on in the heart of Jeroboam and that which he decided to do is being repeated in our days, even in the movement that we are a part of, where there's concern among ministry leaders and congregational leaders that if they stop keeping the festivals according to what they've been doing, following the Orthodox Jewish Babylonian calendar, that will create problems for their ministries, or that will create problems for their congregations. So they have a board meeting and decide we're just not going to do it, or we're going to disconnect ourselves from the people who are either doing it or teaching it. We're all trying to believe that Yeshua is the Messiah and follow him in spirit and truth, and we accept that he followed the Torah, and we're endeavoring to follow the Torah as well. But in that, we have to be careful to not repeat the sins of our forefathers, and particularly the sin of Jeroboam, because it's really not complicated. All that we have to do to be in unity is to believe that Yeshua followed the Torah, and he did not follow Baal worship. He did not follow mixed worship. He did not follow the Babylonian calendar. And it shouldn't be complicated. It should be very simple. It should be very obvious. So the challenge that ministry leaders have and congregational leaders have is to examine what they're doing, because how did we even get here? We got here, I believe, in innocence. We come out of the church, we're keeping Christmas and Easter, we're eating pig, we don't even know we're supposed to be keeping the festivals. Now we realize we're supposed to follow the Torah, we're supposed to keep the festivals, and then we're wondering, how should we do it? Well, there's nothing before us to tell us how to do it, so we just start doing what we know, and that is, the Judaism is been doing it this way. Well, why don't we do it that way until the God of Israel opens up our eyes and gives us a better understanding of things. And then once he gives us this better understanding, now we're responsible for it. To as much is given, much is required. We're responsible for it once he starts to reveal it. And that's where the challenge comes to the leaders and to the heads of congregations is, are they willing to be faithful to Yeshua? Are they willing to be faithful to the Torah? Are they willing to admit that innocently, by and large, they've been in mixed worship and come out of that mixed worship? So it's the prophetic voice that caused them to be brought out. He sent, the God of Israel sent the prophets in 2 Kings chapter 17.
Yeah.
And in our day, he sends the ministry of the spirit of Elijah to awaken us and to cause us to repent and follow the Torah as the God of Israel meant for it to be followed.
So, if I understand the whole principle here, and if I were to boil it down, I think into just kind of a simple statement, I would say something like this: if the leaders and the congregational leaders of the Messianic movement today, if we find ourselves saying, well, I don't want to cause division in my congregation. I don't want to cause division amongst the people that are part of my group. Essentially, what we're saying is,
don't walk in the sin of Jeroboam.
Yeah, but I think it's even more, we're repeating the words of Jeroboam to his people, the northern kingdom, and we're essentially agreeing with Jeroboam, saying we don't want to cause division, but that's what's going to happen. There is going to be division. The Beit Zadok priests, that was part of the division. They went to the Qumran. They left. Paul says, Galatians 4:25. Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children, her sons. Paul is saying to the Galatian crowd, Jerusalem, present-day Jerusalem's in slavery with her children, her sons. Let us not follow that example. We don't want to be in slavery.
This is talking about according to the flesh. And the flesh is human reasoning. Okay, the flesh is human reasoning. Let's look at Romans in chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. And we are going to look at verses 6, 7, and 8. Romans 8,
okay.
6, 7, and 8. To be carnally minded is death. To be spiritually minded is life, chai, and peace, shalom. Now look at this. The carnal mind. Now the carnal mind is based upon human logic and reasoning. The carnal mind is an enemy against God, and the carnal mind is not subject to the Torah of God, neither indeed can it be. So speaking of the carnal mind, natural human logic and reasoning that is contrary to the Torah, the carnal mind is so that they that are in the flesh cannot please God. And so in the introduction to the Mishnah, logic and reasoning is carnal. And carnal is in the flesh. And the flesh is Jerusalem, which now is.
And that's why he's doing this 15th day of the 8th month. He's being very carnal, and he's saying, I don't want to lose my power and my authority.
He did it by human reasoning. Human reasoning, human logic. If I do this, this will be the consequence. It will be bad for me. He's following the carnal mind. He's following in Galatians 4:25 the Jerusalem which now is, compared to the Jerusalem above. The Jerusalem above is according to the Spirit, according to the promise. The Jerusalem above is the Zadok priestly calendar. That is following the Torah the way the Lord said to do it.
Here we're comparing Vayikra Leviticus 23:2 with Leviticus 23:39. Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, this is Leviticus 23:2, right? the feasts of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the feast, the festivals, the Moedim, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, or literally in Hebrew, proclamations. These are my feasts. These are my festivals. Leviticus 23:39 in comparison, and where it says, and on the 15th day of the 7th month you will keep the festival of Yahovah 7 days.
So, according to the Torah, this is when you're supposed to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. But Jeroboam kept the Feast of Tabernacles according to a different calendar. He did it on the 8th month and the 15th day.
I want you to read Isaiah chapter 1, verses 13 through 14.
Right.
Isaiah 1, chapter 13 through 14. And for the audience, for my viewers here, please open up your Bible and take a look here with us. Join us.
Isaiah Yeshayahu chapter 1, verses 13 and 14.
Yep.
Bring no vain oblation. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbath, the calling of your assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They are trouble unto me. I am weary to bear them.
They're your festivals. They're not mine. My festivals are not your festivals. And you have chosen, when you keep your festivals, when you keep your ideas of what you think the festival is,
according to your calendar,
and you're not keeping my festival the way I have designed them, set them to be, then they are worthless, they are iniquity, and I want no part of it. But he's not saying you don't keep the festivals and don't keep it. He's just calling them my feasts, my Moedim, my festivals. So let's go ahead and let's summarize what we just went through with the sin of Jeroboam.
Jeroboam said in his heart, which means this was his human logic and rationale and reasoning. He said, if his people that were under him, if they go to do the sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, that's the temple, if they go to keep the festivals in Jerusalem at the temple, that is, if we do it according to the ways that the Zadok priests who were in charge in the temple, that is according to the priestly calendar, then he reasoned the heart of the people that he was under would turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and he said that will create division. And so, because of how he rationalized this within himself, he decided that he was not going to allow his people to go to Jerusalem and to keep the festivals according to how it was being done by the Zadok priests, according to the priestly calendar. So he set up an alternative system under his authority, wherein he kept the festivals at a different time. And so, as we mentioned, in making this decision, it was done with advice. It says the king took counsel. And so it says that he made shrines of the high places. He made priests from every class of people, not the sons of Levi. And so instead of acknowledging the authority of the Zadok priests in Jerusalem, he's going to make his own priests. And historically, the Hasmonean Maccabean priesthood, they became a substitute priesthood for the Zadok priests, and in function, Rabbinic Judaism today is doing and replacing the Zadok priesthood, who followed the festivals according to their calendar. So functionally, Rabbinic Judaism is playing that role by stating that the festivals should be followed according to their decrees and their rulings. And so as a result, Jeroboam kept the festivals at an alternative time according to an alternative calendar. And so this is in essence the sin of Jeroboam.